Stop buying chicken feed. There are 5 plants that grow back every time you cut them and cost absolutely nothing. These plants can replace 40 to 60% of the feed bill starting this very season, without pellets or additives. Ancient farmers fed entire flocks on these plants for centuries before a single bag of commercial feed ever existed. Commercial agriculture buried this knowledge the moment bagged feed became a product they could sell on a monthly basis. By the end of this video, you will know exactly which 5 plants to grow, how to set them up once, and harvest them forever. You will also understand why this information never appears on any feed company's website or in any commercial poultry guide. Here is the number that should make any chicken keeper genuinely angry. A flock of just 10 birds costs $900 to $1,400 a year in feed. That is feed alone, before bedding, before vet bills, before equipment, just the monthly bag that never stops showing up. Feed prices have climbed 28 to 40% since 2021. The bag that cost $15 3 years ago is pushing $25 to $30 today. Next year it will be higher, and the year after that, because someone else sets the price and there is no alternative in sight. You are locked into a system where the only exit is either quitting chickens or finding a different way to feed them. Meanwhile, your birds are eating processed, standardized pellets that meet the bare legal minimum for nutrition. Not what chickens were built to eat, not what kept flocks healthy for thousands of years before bagged feed was invented. The evidence shows up directly in the egg basket. Pale yolks, thin shells, inconsistent laying cycles through the seasons. That is not a breed problem, and it is not a management problem. It is a diet problem with a solution sitting in the ground. Chickens have existed on this earth for thousands of years, and for the overwhelming majority of that time, nobody bought feed. Not a single bag, not a single pellet. Farmers grew what their flocks needed right there on the land, and the birds thrived. Ancient farmers across Asia, Europe, and Africa understood something modern poultry keeping has almost completely abandoned. Chickens are omnivores built for dietary diversity. They need living greens, protein-rich plants, deep roots, and variety. The land, managed correctly with the right plantings, provides all of that nutrition for free on any property of any size. Historical farming records describe flocks that rarely saw a vet, laid consistently through the seasons, and cost almost nothing to maintain. These were not primitive setups. They were intelligent closed-loop systems where the right plants fed the birds, and the birds fertilized the plants. Then commercial feed arrived, and almost overnight, centuries of accumulated farming knowledge became commercially inconvenient. Feed companies needed customers, and customers needed to believe they could not survive without the monthly product purchase. The message shifted quickly. Chickens need specially formulated feed, and you cannot do this without the bag. That message made billions of dollars for the industry, but it never made it true. The 5 plants in this video are not trendy homesteading hacks. They are the backbone of pre-industrial poultry nutrition. Validated by generations of farmers who had no feed store to fall back on and kept thriving productive flocks anyway. Plant number 1 is Comfrey, the forever protein plant, and the single most important planting any chicken keeper can make. If only one plant were possible to grow for a flock, this would be the one, without any close competition. Comfrey contains 20 to 25% protein by dry weight, rivaling expensive commercial protein supplements sold at premium prices. Unlike any supplement that gets purchased, Comfrey grows back every single time it gets cut. 4 to 6 harvests per season. Same plant, 0 replanting, year after year. Once established, it survives drought, frost, neglect, and almost everything else. The mechanism that makes Comfrey extraordinary is the depth its roots reach, up to 10 feet into the subsoil below. Most plants cannot get anywhere near that depth, which limits them to the nutrient layer near the surface. Those deep roots pull up calcium, potassium, phosphorus, and trace minerals that shallow-rooted plants never access at all. All of that deep nutrition concentrates directly in the leaves that get harvested and fed to the flock. When chickens eat Comfrey, they are consuming minerals pulled from deep underground that no commercial feed can easily replicate. Comfrey grows in USDA zones 4 through 9, Plant it once in a sunny spot near the coop and essentially leave it alone. Cut the leaves every 4 to 5 weeks during the growing season and wilt them slightly before feeding. Fresh comfrey has high moisture content. Wilting for a few hours makes it much easier for birds to eat and digest properly. One mature plant produces 30 to 50 pounds of leaves annually. 10 plants can supply a serious portion of a small flock's needs. Chickens eat comfrey fresh, wilted, or chopped into existing feed, and the plant keeps coming back for decades without intervention. The root system regenerates the plant so aggressively that even cutting it to the ground accelerates rather than harms production. A single initial investment of root cuttings, costing under $15, can establish a comfrey patch that feeds chickens for 20 years. Plant number 2 is Moringa, the nutrient bomb tree that makes experienced chicken keepers stare at their feed bill in disbelief. The leaves contain 25 to 30% protein on a dry matter basis, higher than most commercial feeds currently available on the market. They are also loaded with vitamins A and C, calcium, and iron. The exact nutrients laying hens burn through fastest at peak production. In the right climate, a single moringa tree grows so aggressively and prolifically that it almost feels unfair. Moringa leaves are soft, highly digestible, and packed with bioavailable nutrition in a form chickens find genuinely appealing. Keepers who introduce fresh moringa consistently report darker yolks, stronger shells, and noticeably more alert birds within weeks. That is not coincidence. That is nutrition doing exactly what it was designed to do when the diet becomes genuinely balanced. Moringa thrives in USDA zones 9 through 11 as a permanent year-round tree that requires minimal management once established. In zones 7 and 8, it grows as a seasonal crop, dying back in winter, but returning vigorously from established roots each spring. In colder zones, grow it in large containers. Bring it indoors during freezing months, and set it out again when temperatures rise. Plant in full sun, prune it hard every few months to keep it bushy and productive, and harvest leafy branches directly for the flock. Dry excess leaves during peak season, and crumble them into feed during winter when fresh greens become scarce or unavailable. One tree produces several pounds of leaves per harvest cycle. 3 or 4 trees keep a small flock supplemented all season. The feed store has no equivalent product at any price, and moringa costs nothing after the initial planting is established. Plant number 3 will surprise almost everyone hearing about it for the first time. Azolla, the water plant that doubles every 3 days. Azolla is a floating aquatic fern that grows on the surface of still water with no soil and no fertilizer required. Under the right conditions, it doubles its mass every 2 to 3 days through the active growing season. Harvest half, feed it to the chickens, and the remaining half grows back to full coverage within days automatically. The protein content of dried azolla sits at 25 to 35%, placing it in direct competition with soybean meal in commercial feeds. Soybean meal is the expensive protein ingredient inside most bagged layer feed, and azolla can replace a meaningful portion of it. The mechanism behind azolla's explosive growth is a nitrogen-fixing bacteria living inside the fern's leaf structure. This bacteria pulls nitrogen directly from the surrounding air and converts it into nutrition the plant can use immediately. Azolla therefore grows in plain water without needing the nutrient-rich conditions that other productive plants require. A kiddie pool, a large plastic storage bin, or any shallow container filled with water is all that is needed to begin. Float the azolla starter culture on top, place the container in partial sunlight, and allow it to establish and expand. Every 2 to 3 days, scoop half the surface coverage, rinse it briefly, and toss it directly into the run. The flock will clean it up quickly, and the remaining half in the container will be back to full coverage within days. A single small pool produces several pounds of fresh feed per week with zero ongoing cost beyond the water it sits in. 2 or 3 containers running simultaneously can provide a meaningful protein supplement for a flock of 6 to 10 birds. No land requirement, no soil preparation, no ongoing cost, just water, indirect light, and 3 days of patience between harvests. Plant number 4 gives something the others cannot: underground energy storage that feeds a flock straight through winter. Jerusalem artichoke is a native North American perennial that produces edible tubers underground every autumn without fail. Those tubers are rich in carbohydrates, delivering dense energy to chickens exactly when they need it most. Cold months are when fresh greens disappear and commercial feed bills spike. Jerusalem artichoke fills that gap directly. The stalks grow 6 to 10 feet tall during the growing season and can be chopped and fed as roughage throughout summer. Then, in autumn, the tubers get dug and fed raw to the flock. No cooking, no processing, just direct feeding. Here is the detail that makes Jerusalem artichoke genuinely remarkable compared to most annual feed crops. It self-seeds aggressively from tubers left in the ground over winter, returning every spring without any replanting required. Plant it once in USDA zones 3 through 9, and it survives brutal winters that would kill almost anything else in the garden. Chop the tubers into smaller pieces before feeding to prevent waste and make them easier for birds to manage. Better yet, leave tubers in the ground and harvest only what is needed each week through early winter. The soil itself acts as natural cold storage, keeping tubers perfectly preserved and nutritionally intact until needed. No bins, no freezers, no processing equipment required. The ground does all the storage work automatically. 10 plants occupy less space than a standard raised garden bed and produce enough tubers to supplement a small flock for weeks. The stalks provide roughage all summer. The tubers provide carbohydrates all autumn. Nothing from this plant goes to waste. It grows in poor soil, handles drought, and neglect better than almost any other crop, and never needs to be replanted. Plant number 5 is the one commercial agriculture worked hardest to remove from common farming knowledge: tree collards. Most greens are annuals that grow, produce, die, and force replanting from scratch at the start of every single season. Tree collards break that cycle completely and permanently from a single initial planting. Tree collards are a true perennial vegetable that grows 6 to 10 feet tall and produces large nutritious leaves continuously. From one planting, they produce for 5 to 10 years, providing fresh greens in months when nothing else in the garden is growing. In mild climates, they produce year-round without pause. In colder zones, they go dormant in winter, but return vigorously each spring. This means chickens get fresh greens in November and March, months when every other green source has long since disappeared. The nutritional profile makes them ideal for laying hens. Leaves contain vitamins A, C, and K, plus calcium and iron. These are the exact nutrients hens burn through most rapidly during peak egg production and through the demanding winter period. The leaves are tender enough that chickens eat them readily straight off the plant, or chopped directly into the run. Propagation requires no seeds, because tree collards do not produce viable seed. They start exclusively from stem cuttings. Cuttings root reliably in soil or water within 2 to 3 weeks and can be sourced from fellow homesteaders or specialty nurseries. Plant in well-drained soil with full to partial sun and harvest outer leaves weekly throughout the season without stressing the plant. 4 to 6 established plants supply consistent greens for a small flock for years without replanting, seed costs, or seasonal restarts. This is what perennial food security looks like in practice. A living system that keeps producing long after the planting work ends. 2 years ago, the monthly feed bill for a flock of 12 birds was $110. And it was accepted as simply the cost of keeping chickens. Every forum said the same thing: buy the feed, pour it in the feeder, and repeat that cycle every month forever. Then a financially difficult month cut the feed budget in half and forced a serious look at alternatives that had been dismissed. Comfrey had appeared in homesteading content before, but always seemed like one of those ideas that sounds better than it performs. 10 Comfrey root cuttings, ordered online for under $15, went into a neglected corner of the property and got forgotten for 6 weeks. Coming back to that corner 6 weeks later and seeing the growth stopped the work entirely. The plants had taken off completely. Leaves got cut and tossed into the run, and the chickens went after them with a level of enthusiasm that was immediately striking. 3 weeks later, a kiddie pool of Azolla went in beside the coop. 2 weeks after that, tree collards went along the fence line. Careful records were kept throughout the transition to track exactly what was changing in feed costs and bird performance. Month 1 showed a 30% reduction in purchased feed. Month 2 showed 40%. By month 4, one bag lasted 3 weeks instead of 10 days. The monthly feed bill dropped from $100 to under $45, less than half the previous cost from a system that required no ongoing purchase. But the more important change was not financial. Egg production went up rather than down during the transition period. Yolks shifted from pale yellow to deep orange within weeks of the birds having consistent access to fresh plant nutrition. Shells became noticeably harder, and 2 hens that had been laying inconsistently for months normalized their production completely. The realization that arrived was not about saving money. It was about having been feeding the flock below its nutritional potential. Commercial feed was not the foundation. It was a nutritionally inferior substitute for what chickens were actually built to eat. Most people who try this system quit before it starts working. Not because the plants failed them, but because of 5 specific mistakes. Mistake 1 is planting too little and expecting results from insufficient volume. 1 comfrey plant will not replace a feed bill, and 1 Azolla pool will not replace a meaningful portion of purchased protein. The system requires volume. At minimum 5 to 10 comfrey plants, 2 to 3 Azolla containers, and 4 to 6 tree collards. Underplanting is the single most common reason people try this approach and walk away before seeing any meaningful results. Mistake 2 is feeding fresh comfrey in large quantities directly off the plant, without any wilting period beforehand. Fresh comfrey has very high moisture content, and feeding large amounts immediately can cause loose droppings and digestive upset. Wilt the cut leaves in the sun for half a day before feeding. This concentrates the nutrition and makes it easier on digestion. Mistake 3 is setting up Azolla containers in full direct afternoon sun, rather than a partially shaded location. Azolla needs light to grow, but water temperatures above 95 degrees Fahrenheit will wipe out the entire culture within days. Position containers where they receive morning sunlight and afternoon shade, and always maintain at least 2 separate pools. If one culture crashes from heat stress, the backup pool keeps the feed supply running without interruption. Mistake 4 is harvesting all Jerusalem artichoke tubers at once in autumn, rather than using the ground as natural storage. Digging everything in October creates weeks of storage management work when the soil would do that work for free. Harvest only what is needed each week and leave the rest in the ground. Freshness, nutrition, and labor all improve with this method. Mistake 5 is giving up during the establishment phase when the plants appear to be doing very little visibly. Comfrey looks nearly dead for the first 4 weeks. Moringa seems to stall for a frustratingly long period before taking off. Jerusalem artichoke does almost nothing visible above ground during its entire first season in the ground. Every one of these plants is building an extensive root system before it demonstrates results above the soil surface. Push through the first full season, and none of these plants will ever need to be started over from the beginning again. Here is what chicken keeping looks like 3 years from today, if planting begins this season. The comfrey patch is established and producing 300 to 500 pounds of leaves every growing season without a single additional input. The Azolla pools run themselves, scoop every 2 days, feed, and the remaining culture replenishes itself automatically. Tree collards are providing fresh greens in November and March when every other source of green nutrition has disappeared. Jerusalem artichokes are banking underground calories for winter without requiring any labor from the person managing the flock. The feed bill is cut in half and potentially more, depending on flock size and how many of the 5 systems are running. But the deeper shift is not financial. It is the psychological shift from being a customer to being a producer. The feed store price board stops being something that gets checked with anxiety every time the bag runs low. Supply chain disruptions, price spikes, and seasonal shortages become things to read about rather than things to manage personally. The flock's nutrition is growing in the backyard under direct control, not arriving on a truck from a processing facility. Egg quality improves as a direct result of the nutritional upgrade. Deeper yolks, harder shells, more consistent laying. Bird health improves as immune function responds to the full-spectrum nutrition that commercial feed simply cannot replicate. The system gets stronger every year without starting over. Established roots go deeper, yields increase, and costs keep dropping. Plant once, harvest for decades. That is the fundamental economic and biological advantage of perennial feed systems. This is what self-sufficient chicken keeping actually looks like. Not zero feed costs overnight, not perfection. It is a living, regenerating system that compounds in the farmer's favor every single season without requiring a restart. Which of these 5 plants are you starting with first? Comfrey, Azolla, Moringa, Jerusalem artichoke, or tree collards? Drop the answer in the comments right now. And if any of these are already growing for your flock, share the results. How much has the feed bill dropped? What changes appeared in the birds? What worked faster than expected? That experience helps every other chicken keeper watching this make a better and more informed decision for their flock. If this video delivered real value, hit subscribe and the bell for weekly content on feeding flocks better for less. The feed store is not the only option. It never was. The right plants just need to go into the ground first. Start with 1 plant this week, give it a full season to establish, and let the results determine what gets planted next. Your flock has always been capable of this level of health and production. The nutrition gap was the only thing standing between. Comfrey is one of the few plants on Earth that accumulates silica, which directly supports feather quality and eggshell integrity. The potassium content in Comfrey leaves rivals commercial potassium supplements sold at specialty poultry stores. A Comfrey patch left unharvested for 1 season will self-spread through root division and triple in size without any help. Chickens given free access to a Comfrey patch will self-regulate their intake. They eat what they need and ignore the rest. Wilted Comfrey can also be dried completely and crumbled into winter feed, extending its value through months when it is dormant. Moringa leaves dry and store well at room temperature for months, making it possible to stockpile summer production for winter use. The dried leaf powder can be mixed directly into water, fermented feed, or scattered over standard pellets to boost nutrition. Studies on poultry nutrition consistently show Moringa supplementation increases egg weight and improves yolk pigmentation measurably. In the right climate, a single Moringa tree pruned regularly can supply enough leaves for a flock of 8 to 10 birds consistently. Azolla can also be dried in thin layers, powdered, and mixed into feed as a concentrated protein supplement for winter months. The water from an Azolla pool is itself a mild liquid fertilizer that can be used on garden beds or feed crop plantings. Starting with a small purchased Azolla culture costing under $0 can establish multiple pools within 4 to 6 weeks of growth. Azolla also reduces algae growth in the water it covers by outcompeting it for light. The pool stays cleaner as a result. Jerusalem artichoke stalks can be bundled and used as a windbreak around chicken coops during the coldest months of the year. The flowers that appear in late summer attract pollinators that benefit every other feed crop and garden plant on the property. A single planting left unmanaged will naturalize and spread along fence lines over several years, expanding the harvest automatically. Tree collared stems that get too tall can be bent and staked horizontally, encouraging multiple new vertical shoots from each node. Each additional vertical shoot becomes a new productive stem. This one managed plant eventually produces as much as 3 or 4 unmanaged ones. Experienced growers keep a backup pot of rooted cuttings at all times, so any plant lost to disease or frost can be replaced immediately. Tree collards respond well to the nitrogen in chicken manure. Planting them near or within the rotation zone accelerates their growth. Running all 5 plants simultaneously creates true redundancy. If one system underperforms in a given season, the others compensate. The combined biomass produced by 5 established perennial feed systems on one property can sustain flocks through most weather events. Unlike commercial feed, the nutritional profile of fresh plant matter varies in ways that naturally encourage microbial diversity in the gut. Healthier gut microbiomes in chickens correlate directly with better immune function, higher laying rates, and longer productive lives. The soil beneath a mature Comfrey, Moringa, and tree collard planting also improves measurably each season as root systems deepen. Improved soil biology means the plants themselves become more nutritious over time, compounding the feeding benefit every year. Neighbors who see established perennial feed systems often ask for cuttings. Tree collards and Comfrey propagate freely from divisions. Sharing propagation material builds community resilience and provides a local network of growers who collectively strengthen the system.